Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I'm naturopathic Dr. Fiona Chin, co-founder of the Kidney Disease Solution and Kygenesis, which is our supplement range. And I'm joined again today by the beautiful Nicole Williams. Nicole is a mindset coach, but she's so much more than that. She's worked in internal medicine and in the public hospital system for a really long time, helping people navigate that, helping people understand how they can advocate for themselves within the healthcare model for chronic disease, which is what she's really great and passionate about. But she's stepped out and doing her own thing as a mindset coach and taking everything that she knows from being in a great big public system for such a long time. And I guess, Nicole, what you've watched patients and clients go through having to navigate it and everything that comes up for them, and then just giving them better solutions and strategies on how to deal with all the stuff that comes up, which is leads me to what we want to talk about today, which is fear. But anything I missed, anything else you want to add about what you're doing these days?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, like you said, my passion is really to empower and support, right? I want to make sure that anyone who's navigating chronic disease understands the dynamics of the emotions that come along with that and how your thoughts are connected to that. And then certainly there's that side of advocacy for them to understand and feel empowered to speak up for themselves, establish a good communication plan with their provider. So there's so many kind of pieces that contribute to that overall side of empowerment and feeling just a little more in control.
Yeah, and before we get started, I think just to your point, I think so many people, when they're diagnosed with a chronic disease, hand their power over, later to feel like they were disempowered or they weren't listened to, or they wish they knew there were better options, because especially the older generation, there is still a little bit of a God complex when it comes around to specialists and things like that versus, the advent of internet. Well, yes, that does annoy a lot of our practitioners, but also at the end of the day, you're the one living in your body. You know it better than anybody else. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, and not dismissing gut feelings and intuitions and maybe some stuff that you've come across. And so I think learning how to advocate for yourself and, to your point, feeling empowered within the system is so important, and something that no one gets taught. It's not part of the model when you get a disease of how that goes through. And it's so frustrating. So people that play a role like you do, I just think are completely invaluable, because, I work with a lot of MS patients as well as patients with kidney disease, and they're all told they're going to be in a wheelchair or they have to go on dialysis, or, and they get the bone waved at them, the voodoo curse, and it just may not be true. And that being able to advocate for yourself and say, well, I want you to look at this, I want you to run some different tests, those sort of things, to be able to be confident enough to ask for that stuff is so important. And I wish we had more people like you training people and helping that. So yeah. So
and there's so much going on. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I just was going to say, there's so much happening too, right? It's not just navigating doctor's appointments. It's your personal life. It's maybe you're taking medications or supplements, and you have a different schedule related to that. There's just so much, so much. So yeah, it's important to take small steps. I'm a big believer in, I heard this really great quote from another coach. I can't even take credit. And she said, small hinges open big doors.
Oh, I like that.
Isn't that great? So yeah, I'm a proponent of small steps, right? To really set yourself up to feel more empowered and more in control.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. So let's dive into fear, because I know probably the primary emotion or overarching emotion that people have a few, but when they're diagnosed with something scary like kidney disease, and they're generally told, and if they go on the internet, there's no cure, you're going to be looking at dialysis or a kidney transplant, that would bring up for anyone, I don't think there's an exception here, a huge amount of fear. So walk me through what fear is, and then we can look at some strategies.
Yeah. Yes, exactly right. And that was one of the reasons I thought, let's really just dive into this, right? It's a primary emotion, and it's something, like you said, everyone experiences. And so fear, it is a basic emotional response to a perceived threat or danger. And it has the ability to trigger our body into that flight or fight response. The interesting thing about fear is it also is an essential survival mechanism. So when we are really in danger, when we're really in a life-threatening situation, it's that fear that then helps us, move or react or respond in a way that we need to. The important aspect and what I want to try to convey as I continue to speak is that it's that perceived threat of danger. So when we perceive something to be dangerous or harmful, but it actually isn't, and we stay in that fight or flight, that's when that fear response can begin to have detrimental effects on our emotional health, mental health, and then certainly our body. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get to some strategies on how to break that down, but that's just a simple, basic definition of fear.
Great. And you were saying before we sort of hit record that you've got 3 types of fear. I'd love you to walk us through that, because I think people just think fear is fear, right? And most people go to the fight or flight, but I know there are some other physiological responses that people can have to fear that, and I don't know if that's what you're going to cover, that may not fall into the fight or flight. We know there's faint and freeze and a few other bits and pieces that people may not have put together, that they're in a fear or stressful state. So walk me through the types of fear and then the physiology behind it.
Yeah. So the first is the primal fear. So this is a natural, normal reaction to fear when you have a real threat of danger, right? So this is when your heart starts beating fast. You might feel tingles on your skin, right? I have a fear of snakes. So if I see a snake, I'm going to be gone. Right. And that to me feels like a threat. A primal fear isn't something that you're necessarily taught. So it's your body's natural response to something that you perceive as that threat or danger. The other interesting thing, just in terms of like our history as humans, right? Like if we think back to the days when there was like our predecessors, right, who were living outside. And many people at that moment, if they saw like a wild animal chasing them and that person was attacked or there was something scary that happened, anyone observing that is kind of cataloging, saying, okay, that's dangerous, right? That is a threat to me. And so they pick up on that behavior and that response, right? Okay. And so over time, that kind of response is certainly passed down. The second type of fear is irrational. So these fears don't make any logical sense. They tend to vary from person to person. And they're usually based on an extreme trauma. These are fears that are often taught. Again, could be because of specific individual experience. And these type of fears, you typically don't have proof. Right. So if a snake is slithering towards me, there's my proof, right? This thing is coming towards me. I'm running. But there are some fears where you simply don't have any proof. But they exist, right? The third is a rational fear. A fear, and in the chronic disease community, I believe that most of the fears are rational. Yeah. In the sense of like a fear of dying. Yes. It's a very rational fear. So when something is clear or an imminent threat to your emotional or physical well-being, then it makes sense to have that fear response. So you're standing on the edge of a cliff. Maybe you're hiking. You do a lot of hiking, Fiona, right? You might be standing just at the edge of this like cliff, and there's that very rational fear. And like I said, I really believe that is the fear that most people experience. The challenge again is identifying when it is a rational fear and when it is just a fear that just may not have merit. Again, right? Where's the proof? So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that makes complete sense, especially like you're saying, if people are going in and being diagnosed with kidney disease and they're being told they're going to go on dialysis or they have to have a transplant, the thought of being hooked up to a machine and losing their freedom is a very rational fear. The thought of
potentially going through a transplant and not knowing about that. Very rational sort of fear. So, yeah, that all makes sense. So, how are you helping people when they have, what strategies are you implementing for people when they're coming to you and they're saying, look, because I guess what happens is when we have a fear, we start to make decisions based off the fear. So that becomes the lens through which we look through our life. So then suddenly everything becomes about either mitigating how to not get on dialysis, or if people really believe the shaking of the bone curse and that's their only way, then they live with that dread every day, that every day is a step closer to, living hooked up to a dialysis machine, which then robs you of being in the present moment, of enjoying life, because it takes you out of the moment, which is all that exists, as we know. And It ends up being something other people reminisce about the past of what they wish they'd done different, give themselves a hard time, or they are out into the future and feeling super anxious and, as you say, fear. And fear can manifest both depression and anxiety, as we know, depending if you're a future or a past-based person. So someone comes to you and they're like, Nicole, I'm anxious all the time. The thought of being hooked up to a dialysis machine 3 days a week, missing my grandchildren, feeling ill. Like, what strategies do you have to help people cope with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First, I want to help them really get to the root of the fear. So much of fear is based on uncertainty, just like you mentioned. You're starting dialysis, you have no clue what to expect, or maybe you've heard stories. So I want to first work with them to really help them identify what is the real root of your fear. It's that unknown. Mm-hmm. And what parts of that uncertainty or unknown space are really bringing you the fear? Those types of things really need to be teased apart, because we tend to lump fear. So, like back to the example with the snake, right? For me, it's all snakes, but not all snakes are dangerous, right? Yeah. Some of them are not. So, it's about kind of, again, teasing that apart first, really understanding the root of it. And I would say it's important to understand for that individual, what are their current fears? Like just making just a list. Maybe for them, it's not just dialysis. Maybe it's the cost of dialysis and how that will impact their finances. Or maybe it's, if they have kids, maybe it's who's going to take care of my kid while I'm at. It's all of these little nuanced details that really matter. So again, it's getting to that the root cause of their fear, and then really helping them lay out the laundry list of what those fears could be as the first step. Then we can talk more about how to use that fear in a different way.
Oh, tell me more about that.
So, there's kind of 4 things that I like to use as a way to support clients. The first is to challenge their fear. So challenge your fear-based thinking. And this comes back to identifying the evidence. Mm-hmm. And so you're challenging those fear-based thoughts, and you're really analyzing them. You're analyzing them for accuracy. You're analyzing them with that evidence. And then you want to take some time to rewrite them with better accuracy, a more positive kind of statement. So using the example of this client who is starting dialysis, it might be something like, so analyzing the accuracy, really getting the information. How often would you have to go to dialysis? What are the symptoms that you might experience post-dialysis? The evidence might be hard because that person hasn't experienced dialysis yet. But again, understanding your landscape, so then you can either pick and choose those moments when you're going to step into that space more empowered by setting up a plan for yourself, or also really taking time to rewrite that for you, rewrite those thoughts, challenge those feelings that you might be having.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I know for myself personally, it's the unknown that really unsettles me. And so having a chronic disease myself, that was the thing that I was really scared of, being told this is what's going to happen. And there's a few things that I have learnt as a human is, number one, we are far more resilient and adaptable than we give ourselves credit for when we move into the unknown. So, you know, if you told me 10 years ago that my ability to walk would be, which it is, limited to having to use crutches and a great big leg brace and things like that, I would have been like, not interested, way too hard basket, don't want to live with stuff like that. And I would have been hugely anxious and things like that. Now that that is my reality, I'm still at the gym 5 days a week. I hiked around Bhutan in January. Like, you learn to adapt. There's adaptability that goes with it. And to our example of people in dialysis, once you're in it, you're like you say, once the brain, it's known, that takes that unknown fear out about it. And so it's like, okay, well, all right, this is reality 2.0. We'll just adapt. And I have a choice to be a victim or not be a victim. And this is how I choose to adapt and not let it, you know, affect my life. So I think it's that unknown piece. And like you're saying, is really break it down. And what I heard when you were saying that is, you're making the illogical logical. And it's when it becomes logical, it takes the fear out of it, because then it's just pragmatic, logical step versus I'm going to paint this great big scary picture of something I don't know about. It's like, well, what do you know? You know, like you have to go into a hospital. Let's give you all the knowns about it. You may not know what it feels like and all that sort of stuff, but you know how many hours you'll be there. Right. You know how long the drive will take. So you can, it's like the more known you can put into that sort of stuff, you diminish the fear around the unknown. Is that, yeah?
Yes, that is it. You always, Fiona, have an amazing way of just summarizing my points. That's exactly it. And, you know, even with your own story, I bet 10 years ago, if you leaned into that fear or believed that fear, it would have probably completely changed your next steps, right? Your ability to continue to have hope, build resiliency. Even though 10 years later, you're at that place, you would have been at a completely different stage. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's so true. Okay. What other coping strategies have you got in there?
Yeah. So the next one is around building it's called a fear-friendly mindset. Ooh, and this comes more about practicing the mindfulness, practicing the counteract. So some examples I have here are the fear-based thought might be, I'll make my kidney disease worse if I don't follow this nutrition plan exactly how the dietitian has given it to me.
Gotcha.
So to counteract that, it would be, I'm so happy that I chose to work with a dietitian who's guiding me to make the best decision. And if I have trouble with the plan, or if I make a mistake, I can go back to that person and we can change it. We can, tweak the plan, right? So it's taking that fear-based thought, that doomsday thought, and bringing some more factual information into this. It is first acknowledging the right step that you took. You reached out to a dietitian to help better yourself. You did that because you knew that person would guide you.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll continue to lean on that guidance.
We're so good at beating ourselves up, aren't we? I know I am.
So good.
I'm a master of it. It's like, have you drunk enough water today? You've had just your drink this morning, even though it's full of Chinese herbs and most people go bleh. And I'm like, yeah, no, I didn't do the right thing. It's like, come on, woman, like you're doing pretty good. Give yourself a break. Yeah, we're funny creatures.
So this might look like, once we break down kind of the root causes of fear or have that list, is to really go back to that list and identify those thoughts And you have to practice it. Like I think we underestimate how automatic our thoughts and our body responds. And so if we don't practice it, or even read through the list, or just kind of give yourself some space to do the exercise, when you're faced with that fear, your brain and body will respond exactly in the way that it has always responded. It is rehearsed.
Took the words out of my mouth. That's what I wanted to say, is what people forget. And emotions are such an amazing thing, right? Because they have the ability to completely take over, alter our reality, and we believe it.
Yes.
And what I always remind myself is it's just a thought. And I always go, can I prove that thought is real? Is there any evidence that says that absolutely this will happen or this will happen? It's like, no, it's a thought. You don't know. And so the emotions and everything that are triggered by a thought, I'm like, are they real? But when you don't question your thoughts, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, if you're someone that doesn't question your thoughts, because where do thoughts come? This is a rabbit hole, right? Like, where do thoughts even come from? Do they come from like our upbringing? I'm like, where did that thought come from? Like, how did you get into my head? Like, you're not even real. Like, and why did you drop in there? And I guess it's all that stuff from being primitive and living in the wild and, being preyed on. And we tend to ruminate more on the negative than the positive. But boy, you really have to be almost a gatekeeper to what you're allowing in and out of your, as Dr. Joe would say, in and out of your brainstem and dropping into your body, which then becomes something embodied, and how we act. And you have to be all over that stuff. And like you say, it's rehearsed, because otherwise you're on autopilot and you are just letting stuff fly past that has probably no merit. It's not warranted to come through how it is, but because we're not being gatekeepers and being mindful, we just fall prey to it. And then it has this huge physiological effect on our bodies and this great big snowball effect in how we act and go on out into the planet. It blows my brains of how simple it is to come back and just question thought.
Yeah. And setting aside that time, if these fears are coming up so strongly for you that they're hindering you from doing things, they're hindering you from, continuing to support yourself in positive ways, that you really have to break that down. You really, really do. And
it's not, to your point, it's not easy. Like you were saying, you have to practice it. It is because it's learnt and embedded, and often kidney disease is 60 plus been diagnosed. You've had 60 years of rehearsing that way. Right.
Yeah. And we have spoken previously just about even with that diagnosis happening for you, some of the other mindset challenges are going to become personified. Like, they're going to become even more challenging because you're faced with this really big life transition. Yeah. And the last strategy I have here is how can you boost your confidence by managing your fear differently? So as we begin to break down that list, right, identify these thoughts, identify a counteract. If there is a specific trigger for your fear, so for some clients, it might be the doctor's office. What part of the office visit? Is it getting your lab work done? Is it, sitting down and hearing your lab results? What part of this visit is really triggering this fear for you? And what type of plan can we set in place to support you through that process? So it's preparing yourself ahead of time and giving yourself the confidence through this plan. You're building out your own, we say, look for information, look for evidence, but you're building out your own plan and information that you're going to lean on when you face whatever is really challenging you.
Yeah. And again, that's that back to being prepared and pragmatic. You're removing the unknown quantity, which is what people hook their fear onto, right? So you're trying to minimize that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. As much as possible. That's really the key. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes total sense, right? Because then, what you can have control over or around thoughts and stuff, you can have control. And there is then an element that we can't. But at least if you've got all the other stuff, you're minimizing that little bit of the unknown because you're prepared, to be able to do the rest of the stuff. It's so funny. I love watching The Good Doctor because I like medical stuff. And they had this woman who was in an iron lung. And I was like, is anyone still in an iron lung? So I looked that up, the Guinness Book of World Records. And there's a guy that's been in an iron lung for 77 years.
Whoa.
Got polio when he was 5 years in Texas. And he still lives in an iron lung because all the external rib cage supports, he's just too weak. And I'm like, what a life. But then I look, he became a lawyer and he still spends 20 hours in his own lung. He's taught himself to frog breathe so he can get out and breathe and things like that. And I'm like, that for me, I look at that and go, I got no words. But this guy, and it was just, I looked, and it was a bit like that mindset stuff. He was like, well, here's all the stuff I can do. Here's all the stuff I can control and can't control. And here's what I can't do with my body, but I can still go out and learn. My brain still works. I can become a lawyer. And I'm like, wow. I look at that and go, yeah, that for me would be physically impossible. But I'm like, well, it's obviously not. It's a choice, right? And it's a choice of what we can do and put up with, and looking for things that give us inspiration and all of those sort of things. But I think for him, listening to him talk, he was very pragmatic and logical, and really, I didn't hear any fear when he was talking. He'd really done everything that you're talking about. Was this is the stuff I can control, this is the stuff I can't. I just get on with the stuff that I have control over, which is I can still go and do law, and I can do this, and I'm like, that's just amazing. And I didn't hear any fear when listening to him. So
wow.
Yeah.
And it's also sounds like he armed himself with information.
And he had very good parents. They were just like, this doesn't define you. You can do anything you put your mind to, regardless of what your circumstances look like. And I think, everything that you said, that unknown part can also be our environment, whether our partners or family are feeding into that because of how it affects their life and things like that. And it sounded to me like they really did a great job at mitigating that unknown as well, because they're like, well, you don't have control over this, but you've got control over that. It's exactly sort of the method that you spoke about. And so they sort of just kept bringing him back into the present moment of stuff that he could control.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went and had this amazing life. And I think for anyone out there listening worried about being hooked up to dialysis, and I'm not minimizing what people have to go through, so that would be tough. But then I always look with my own stuff of people that have got it a bit harder and are just doing it day in, day out. And I'm like, okay, we humans are capable of this stuff, and this is amazing. And they've done amazing things. And it's really, when you listen to any of these people talk, they've all done and my point is they've all done what you're talking about. Is I don't hear a lot of fear, or they've really managed to overcome that, and they really just focus on what they do have control over, and they channel all their energy into that, not into the stuff they don't, right? And most of us channel all our energy into the stuff we can't control, get completely freaked out, and we forget. And what I see really successful people do, be it in business, their health, whatever, they channel all their energy into the stuff they can control.
They can do. Yeah. I met with a client today, and we didn't discuss fear specifically, but this was our second visit. So the first time we met, we just talked through what she was experiencing. And some of it was, she had a lot of projects going on. She had some assets she needed to figure out what to do with. And she was at the point where she wanted to kind of have a plan, but she felt frozen, right? She has this kidney disease. It kind of hit her out of the blue. And she's an older woman, past retirement age. And so she's like, this was my plan, and now this has changed for me, right? What do I do? And so we had our second visit today, and it was about a month apart. She tackled it head on. I spoke to her today, and she has a plan for what she's going to do with some of her assets. She has reconnected with family. She was just glowing when I spoke to her.
Wow.
And she just shared how she was in some denial, and it was really putting her in this state of just shock and frozen.
Mm.
And so she, based on our first session, it helped her kind of gain more clarity. And I could tell that there was a lot of, paralysis, certainly, that comes with kind of these fear-based thoughts. And so working through a little bit of that in the first session, she really just blossomed into doing what she needed to do to support herself. So it's amazing. I mean, even though I'm here to support everyone, I'm still amazed. Every time I talk to a client, I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So just as a small, tangible example of what's possible.
Yeah. And I think that's where, there's often this thing where, sometimes we have to have our world fall apart through something like a dis-ease to really find our power and make big change. And I think it's this whole thing that we're talking about that been a diagnosis potentially, and it can be other things, partner dying or whatever, something tragic, locks us into maybe not looking at the unknown, where we spend so much time not going there and just going, you know what? Stuff happens whether we think we have control over it or not. And so all I can do is just be pragmatic, push forward with my life, do the stuff that I can have control over. And sometimes you do see people diagnosed with chronic disease like kidney disease really, as you said with this woman, blossom and move because it takes them out of stagnation mode, out of not doing things and out of going, well, I need to take control back. Like we were saying, here's the stuff that I do have control over. So what am I waiting for? Because I've been sitting around on my, not doing anything, and the universe is just dishing stuff at me. Like I may as well go dish it back by going and doing what I want to do. And it's, I'm always like this guy on the Iron Lung. I'm always moved and impressed by these people. And some people have it naturally. They're the big movers and shakers in the world that go and do all of this stuff because they're restless and they're really just naturally good at sitting in the unknown, planning and pushing forward and all of that sort of stuff. Some people just are naturally wired that way. The bulk of us are not.
Right.
And sometimes we need something like kidney disease or MS or spinal cord injury, whatever it is to move that, unfortunately. But, I feel like this is an inspiration or a point where people do have these choices, and it can be you sit in the unknown and you become victim, for want of a better word, to circumstance, or you go, you know what, it may not change my outcomes, but I have control over all these other things that I haven't done or I want to do, and now maybe is the time. So and I'm always, like I say, humans are far more resilient and brave and strong than I sometimes think we give ourselves credit for when our backs are against the wall.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Humans are great, huh? And I bet you must get inspired every day by who you work with.
I am so inspired, truly. Yeah. So fortunate. Because even this client today, she's just setting up a legacy, and I just was in awe of what she's doing, and really, totally inspired. Yeah.
Yeah. But anything else you want to add about fear and managing it and tackling it, Nicole?
No, I don't think so. I think, keeping it really simple and kind of hitting these basic strategies as a starting point for someone who might be really, really having a hard time with some fear-based thoughts.
Yeah. And I think, like you say, keeping it simple to start with is, you don't need to get complicated. It's such a primitive emotion that doesn't need to be any bigger than what it is. So now, if people want to work with you to, and I want to come back to what I said right at the beginning, I think if you're diagnosed with a chronic disease and you hand yourself over to a system that is set up really, unfortunately, and it is the way it is. It's a system that's set up that goes, it is transplant and dialysis, and you're moving along this machine. And we know from what we do that doesn't have to be the outcome. But if I really think working with someone like you to put the brakes on that machine and actually look at other avenues and feel confident enough to dialogue with your practitioner, maybe even fire them and find someone that's more aligned with your values. But I think you really do need an advocate and a coach on your side. to give you the, unless you're
Absolutely.
that, yeah, unless you're that way inclined. And I would say I'm that way inclined. And I even, you know, you need someone in your corner. And if that's not family or friends because they're not versed in this stuff and they don't know how to navigate it, I think having someone like you advocate and be a cheerleader is, I think it's underestimated how important it is. And I think anyone navigating chronic disease needs a Nicole. So how do people work with you? Are you still with K&I or are you doing your own stuff now?
Yeah, so both. So I am still working with the Kidney Nutrition Institute and also expanding my own practice, which is exciting. So the best way right now is to email me. I'm also on Instagram, but
Right.
for those on social media. So it's Nicole at Mind Growth Garden. That's the name of my business. So Nicole at mindgrowthgarden.com is really the best way to meet me, or to introduce yourself or ask questions. I'm also on Instagram under that same name, Mind
Yes,
Growth
you are.
Garden.
We
And
follow
so,
you. So if you follow us, you'll see who we're following. You can find Nicole that way as well.
yeah. And working on some just exciting things that I'll be able to support clients with. So
Amazing.
it's really great.
Yeah. Well, again, I just want to add, say, you know, if anyone's diagnosed with a chronic health disease, I think working with someone like Nicole is underestimated of how powerful it is just to help you find your own legs in the space and not get lost. I think so many people get lost in a part of a machine and a system, and that's one of the saddest things that I've seen. I think working with a health coach or mindset coach like Nicole really will help you find your own space within your diagnosis, because you're not a diagnosis, you're not a disease. So it's finding yourself in amongst all of that. So I'll put all of Nicole's details down below. If there's anything you want Nicole to come on and talk about, she's a regular guest of ours. And I just, we have Nicole on because I think the mindset side is so missed in so many practices and so many models of medicine, but especially in the kidney disease corner. So if there's anything that you would like Nicole to talk about, any specific topics, please put that in the comments below and I can pass it on to Nicole. Make sure you hit subscribe and like. That way you'll get notified of any time we put up new content. Make sure you follow Nicole on Instagram as well. You can find us on www.kidneycoach.com if you want to know more about what we do. We're the same on Facebook, Instagram, all of those great things. Follow us on all our socials. We're putting up great content all the time. Nicole, thank you for being part of our team here and helping change the message when it comes to kidney disease and chronic disease. I am always very grateful to spend some time with your lovely self.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
No worries. Thanks for being part of our community, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.